This is not a long presentation, but just wanted to showcase this concept to you all and get your any feedback or thoughts you have as I go through it. So let's see. This is about, what's that?
You have the clicker.
I have a clicker. Thank you. Centralized Volunteer Management. So just to be clear, the topic is around volunteer management. It's not about all volunteers everywhere ever. So it's really more volunteers that support our mission as a city and the things that we do as a city organization, not necessarily all of our nonprofit partners out there. So let's start off with, here we go. So council, these are leading questions. Does a strong volunteer program enhance community engagement?
Yes.
There we go. Good job. That was the right answer. And specifically, how, just things I would add are community resilience, enhanced local resources, fostering social cohesion. I'm sure there's a variety of others. So with volunteerism, who benefits from volunteerism in the community? Who are some of the parties that volunteer from that? The volunteers themselves, absolutely.
Our citizens.
The city?
Yeah, residents in general.
Absolutely.
Residents, exactly. The answer is everybody.
Yeah,
all right, good job, guys.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. We all win.
That's a short
We're all
list,
winners.
yeah.
So next question is, what makes volunteers continue to deepen their contributions to the common good in their community? Or put another way, imagine yourself in the shoes of a volunteer. What would make you come back and keep doing that? What type of experience are you looking for?
Relationships.
Yeah.
Building relationships?
It's the networking relationships, and it's actually validation that what you're doing is good, is
Yeah, so the purpose.
The
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
Seeing the outcomes that actually stay. So if I went and cleaned up the street and the next day it's trash again, I'm not excited about that. But if we go to Macedonia and we clean that up, it stays and it looks great, and you just go out there and give it a little hug every once in a while.
Yeah, so feel like it's achieving
That's right.
something. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also put another way, it's just part of it's having a meaningful experience, and that looks like all the ways that you all just described. So then the next question is, what makes an experience meaningful? And it ties to some of those answers you just gave, but if you're volunteering, what makes the experience feel meaningful to you all?
I think personally, I feel it makes me feel connected to the rest of the community. So I see people, maybe I see them on Facebook once in a while, or we just start chatting about we brought them to Lewisville, how long they've been here. But it's a great way to connect with people on a one-on-one level.
Yeah, awesome.
Is the impact that it brings.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for playing. This was our interactive piece. I'll walk through some more slides now, but really the focus of today's presentation, and you saw it in the intro or just the title, is we're going to talk about our current state of how we utilize volunteers as an organization, and then cast a vision for a future that would involve some centralization that we think would be helpful. So from the volunteer perspective and the city perspective, here are just a couple of lists of what the value proposition is for each party. So if I'm a volunteer and I come and do something with the city, obviously I can make a tangible impact. I can help build connections, as was just discussed a moment ago. There's actually studies out there that talk about how there's a correlation between volunteerism and enhanced mental health, as well as lower mortality. So it's healthy for folks on a personal level. And then the volunteer can gain skills or experience. If it's done well, they learn things, they figure out things, or they learn about their community as well. From the city perspective, it's an opportunity for us to enhance our community engagement, enhance civic pride, and build partnerships. So whether that's with nonprofits, church groups in the community, in between departments within the city, but back to community members, there's partnership opportunities, they abound. And then the last thing from the city perspective is this can help supplement our work and expand service capacity at a minimal cost. There is a cost, but it's at a relatively low cost in relation to other ways in which we achieve work. So this is a list. This just came from a blog. Sue Carter Call is somebody within the volunteer space. She's a PhD and she teaches classes and she has a lot of background. She used this list just to show on one of her blogs how people describe some of the positive or less positive experiences as a volunteer. And as I read through this list, You see a lot of this ties to things you all said a moment ago. As a volunteer, I want to utilize my skills and talents and interests. I want to have a clear purpose, a sense of autonomy. Kind of put another way, she actually titled this article, it was about to feel of use or to feel used. And I think that's kind of the value proposition as a volunteer. See, if I go do something with a group, do I feel like I'm contributing to something and doing something important, or do I feel like I was used? And I think folks in this category, if you feel like you're being taken advantage, there's lack of communication, lack of clarity of what's going on, you're not utilizing my skill sets, then the frustration can set in and the person isn't likely to return or have a positive experience. I nerded out on this because doing HR work, I'm focused on employees. I care a lot about things like motivation of people. There's a book by Daniel Pink. He talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I look at the first three things up there. Those are the three key motivators to individuals. The first thing is tapping into skills, so that's about mastery and learning things. Purpose was the second, and autonomy is the third. So it aligns with how people are motivated. It's the same experience whether you're a volunteer, an employee, somebody in your church, whatever. Those are key elements to a solid experience. So let's talk about where we're at today. We have, you may or may not know this, if you go out on the city's webpage right now, we do have a page dedicated to volunteer opportunities across the city of Lewisville, and there are a lot of them. And we have departments that are doing a great job leveraging volunteers today. I'll talk through, actually on the next slide, this is our best attempt as of today, and it's not 100% accurate, but the point is to try and depict approximately our hours of volunteerism within our departments across the city as of today. So, starting with Parks and Rec, we've got about 7,600 hours a year. Those are primarily with Leela, so opportunities to help out across Leela as well as some at Thrive. They do a great job over there. They drive folks through their website and have a robust program that not only involves city staff but also their partners at UNT and the school district. At the animal shelter, we do about 3,000 hours a year. That model looks very much like a subset of regular volunteers that they're expected to come and show up and volunteer on a regular basis each month. The library has a similar model. We have both teen volunteers and adult volunteers. And there's about 45 of those folks, and it's the same thing. They come in, they come to an orientation, they apply, and then they get kind of put on a roster to volunteer on a regular basis. So particularly at animal shelter and library, the model is very much, you're trying to become a regular volunteer, you're a regular, you're part of the team, you're in here doing work with us. And that's at about 1,000 hours a year with the library. Also in neighborhood services, we have the For the Love event. I've seen many of you all at the For the Love event previously, and that ballpark is about 200 volunteers at about 800 hours. So that's very different there. That's a specific one-time event where you're getting folks out. In that example, that team is tapping on some church communities and some other folks to pull volunteers for that specific event. Then we have the Teen Court. The Teen Court has 557 hours a year. That is, again, our Teen Court is a joint venture between the city of Lewisville and Flower Mound, but those teens spend about 557 hours a year. That hour count does not include folks that are required to go to Teen Court. And then community relations and tourism, we have all our big events. Numbers I got from the team right now are about 120. I feel like that's low, but I think the point is that is another key area that we utilize city staff as well as volunteers to help supplement our activities around all the great events that we put out downtown. And then our fire department has their reserves, so they have a number of folks on reserve, and as they have events, the folks that are on reserves get dispatched out and can choose to participate in events with the fire department. So in total, that's about 14,000 hours a year that we're utilizing today. In each of those departments, we have folks coordinating all of those volunteers in different ways and using different methods. This does not include our partnership with Keep Lewisville Beautiful. This does not include our partnership with the LPC AAA with the police department. But it does include a whole host of other great things that are happening today. So let's talk about that current state. There's the good and the bad of it. One of the challenges, as I went through that list and just described it to you, every department has a little bit different approach. I don't want to use a term we use too much, but it's a little bit siloed in the way we're doing it today. We have different groups with different approaches, and so they have different onboarding processes. And then those members of those teams, if I'm working in the animal shelter, I'm out there sourcing my volunteers. If I need to do that, I'm doing all the communications, I'm recruiting, I'm onboarding, I'm doing everything myself within the department. As we talk with the teams, we also learn that we do pretty well in those departments where we have our regular volunteers and we have an expectation of them, almost treat them like part of the staff team. But sometimes we run into challenges of getting volunteers for our big events. So we need to staff up for something big. We have a hard time finding those individuals, and maybe those folks are having a hard time finding us. And so I think it would make sense if you say, I'm interested in helping, I'm interested in walking a dog, I'm interested in going and volunteering at a special event, or you name it on the list of things in which you could support the city. Figuring out where to go, who to talk to, what process to go through to get there, what are my barriers to entry. It's a little bit all over the place. And so if you think about it from the volunteer perspective, that could be a little bit frustrating. And I would imagine some folks are opting out rather than trying to figure out how to make that actually happen. So I told you the prior slide, that was our attempt at tracking. We don't have a centralized tracking system or process. That was our best guess working with our departments on where we're at today. The future state, we'd like to do a better job of tracking and understanding how we're utilizing volunteers overall. So future state benefits. What we'd like to do is centralize. That doesn't mean take things out of the departments. That means having a centralized function that's supporting those departments and making things more consistent. And so that creates opportunities for efficiency, effectiveness, to enhance that volunteer experience. In a future state, we want to do things like, yeah, there's some great people in this picture. Also, of note, Melissa Canclini, what are you doing right here?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Okay, you can tell me later. Sorry.
We'll just take a picture.
So to enhance the volunteer experience, think about it from that volunteer's perspective. If we had a central place where you go to a certain website and you can see all of our volunteer opportunities, you have clarity about how to access all of those volunteer opportunities, it makes it a lot more likely that you'll buy in and you'll go try those things. And so we want to create consistency, connectedness, and support our departments, because our departments want to do a great job with their volunteers. So that future state that we're envisioning is one in which, through centralized volunteer management, we are doing a more effective job at engaging the community, so hosting and attending community information sessions, collaborating with outside entities. There's a whole bunch of them listed on those 3 bullets, but I think you get the point of collaborating with outside agencies. We want to make our recruitment of volunteers more consistent and clear. So leveraging social media, if we have a centralized place where all the volunteer opportunities are, send folks there and see some economies of scale how we set that up. And then create a consistent and clear onboarding process. And then when it comes to the volunteer experience and retaining them, actually making sure our team's trained up on how to be effective with volunteers, surveying those volunteers, and assuring they're having a great experience, and then having regular communication with them. So the Association of Leaders in Volunteer Engagement, ALIVE, has this framework for effective practices in volunteer engagement. And as I was doing research on this, I thought this was just right on for where we're at. Right now, we're at the top of the wheel. We are having discussions about planning and kind of leadership involvement and our direction of where we want to go. If you set a framework and a foundation that we identify what our funding levels are, what our technology utilization is, and that we plan accordingly, then we can be much more effective than we are today at recruiting, cultivating, and onboarding our volunteers, supporting our teams that are leading our volunteer initiatives, and then measuring that activity and continuing on this process. So this group has a framework. It'd be great for us to get our staff engaged in kind of learning how to model that framework effectively for our organization. So a few examples of organizations that have centralized volunteer management, all in different ways, are Plano, Boulder, and Frisco, 2 local, one out of town. But part of this started in a conversation Claire and I had a while back, because I'd listened to a podcast from Boulder where they talk about their centralized volunteer management program, and they do a great job there. But in Plano, they've had a volunteer program for approximately 40 years. They have a staff of 3. They don't use a centralized software program. I would say they're a unique animal. They've been doing it a long time, and they've got a kind of a whole staff team focused on that activity, and they're doing a lot of volunteer hours. Again, we were right at about 14,000, so they're approximately quadruple where we're at today. But I think a more similar model to what we might want to do is Boulder and Frisco. They each have a centralized software program, and then they have one staff member coordinating that program for the city organization. And you see in Frisco, they're at about double the hours we are today. And I think if we can kind of build a program, we can get to something like Frisco in relatively short order in a year or two. So I'll just close this out and open any question or discussions that you all have. So I went back to, on this slide, talked about, we set a foundation, we identify resources. So one of the things that we'd like to bring into next year's budget, potentially for next year, are one position, a volunteer coordinator. That position will be overall program management, managing technology, planning, all those items I described on the prior pages, and just supporting our teams in being effective in managing volunteers and maximizing the use of volunteers and increasing our community engagement. And then right now we're in the process, we already started a process of looking at a citywide software package. And so the IT team, as well as our Parks and Rec team and some of our other stakeholders are right now involved in a process of identifying what would be the right software if we did one citywide. Right now our budget on that is about $6,000 a year. And depending on what solution we come up with, we could need some resources. We could request some resources around that in future years. There's not one software that everybody's using, so there's a few. So I think it's just going to be us in our evaluation process to identify what makes the most sense for Lewisville. So that's what we're considering. Wanted to share this with you all, get any feedback or any comments or suggestions that you all have today. And that concludes my presentation.
I have a question. So
Yes, ma'am.
the software, the annual recurring costs of $5,000 and $25,000, what swings that towards the upper end of that?
It's just each product, like I list a number of them here, they're all priced differently. So they're all subscription models and they have different pricing levels. So I think that team's going to go through and evaluate those options and identify which ones are at what level and if that correlates with what our needs are. I don't know, Chris, if you'd add anything to that from your perspective. I know we're just starting that process.
Could we write our own?
Could we write our own? We could write our own. I'll let Chris help out on this piece.
So the answer to the question is yes, absolutely we could. Should we? Probably not. So with that, to your point, you described it really well. So you see a wide variety in the ongoing costs. A lot of that's going to depict the functionality, right? The features within the software. We met with all the stakeholders, to Tad's point, probably, I guess about 6 weeks ago now. We intentionally wanted to wait until we got some direction from you guys for our follow-up meeting. But at that point in time, we've got 2 departments using 2 different software solutions now, and then we've got several departments that are leveraging Google Sheets, things of that nature. So definitely a need to consolidate. But again, this is our range, and we will start to evaluate the functionality best used to coordinate between all of the departments. So for instance, one of the features that was explained to us that's really beneficial is, what if I'm volunteering for something over at MCL, right? But at the same time, I'm interested in library opportunities. Well, right now, those are 2 separate programs, 2 separate software, or 2 different ways to sign up. And so we're really trying to consolidate it, because a lot of times your volunteers are the same people wanting to volunteer in different aspects, if you will. So to your point, could we? Yes. Should we? We're going to get a lot more functionality for our dollar here if we were to go as far as procurement.
I feel like this, in a short period of time, would pay for itself.
Yeah, concur.
Over and over again. As far as being a volunteer with an organization or entity, in that you have opportunities to choose different things, when I was a volunteer for LASD under Volley, we were able to do that. They would send us opportunities, and it was awesome.
Yes, in fact, I'll tell you what, Better Impact is one of the solutions that I know we're looking at. I believe it has that functionality, and then there's I can't recall, community relations
That is time counts.
Time counts,
Yeah.
and it has that same functionality as well. And so when we were meeting with the group initially, that was one piece that we had ascertained that we need this moving forward. So when we're starting to look at these different solutions, we're trying to get our criteria as it pertains to what we want in the future state.
Can I get you to back up a couple slides? I forget exactly how many. Keep going, next one. Wait, right there. We just talked about community engagement in one of the first presentations we had and focusing on the Hispanic community. I'm hopeful that because we recognize volunteerism is a great way to get engagement, and that we recognize that the Hispanic community needs a hug to help get them more involved, that you're coordinating your efforts to target that particular demographic.
Yeah, great feedback, yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All looks good, just make sure there's a cancel button.
Okay. Absolutely.
Go forward a couple slides.
Yes, sir.
Keep going. There we go. So I'm looking at the position and role, and it says program planning. Talk to me about how that would work, because right now we have, my understanding is each department has somebody who's planning their programming that requires volunteers.
Yeah, I guess to me, program planning is more the overall. How are we coordinating all these things? Are we keeping, do we have like consistent approach to onboarding?
Okay.
Are we training up our staff to help them manage, schedule, communicate, leverage the volunteers, getting feedback? So when I think of programming, it's more along what you see on this slide than actually in the weeds running that event for that department or helping them clean the cages in the animal shelter.
Yeah, okay, good. What I didn't want to see is, oh, here you go, stand up to Love Our Lewisville. I'm like, well, you've already got people for that.
No, absolutely. Well, and these people in the departments, they know they're volunteers. I think it's just giving additional support.
Yeah, to manage all the volunteering piece of it.
Yes, sir.
If we're looking at software, I would hope that it would be able to address in some way or fashion. Churches tend to volunteer as a group, like they're going to bring 10 people.
Yeah.
So if there's a way for that to be captured, I don't know quite how we would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think some of these software, there's opportunities where you can go more episodic versus what we've talked about in the examples of animal shelter and library, where it's more of a commitment long-term. But also, I see what you're saying of not one individual, but it could be 30 people or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, we're going to bring a team. We don't know how many yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to see if there's a way we can integrate this with, or at least give access to it in some form or fashion with court. I mean, they're not technically volunteer hours. They're
talking about court mandated.
Yeah, court mandated service. But I mean, if there's an angle.
Yeah, well, and right now that's what we say with most of ours is it's not qualified. So I think to your point, there's some opportunity there that we can try and explore with the team, and then with the court team.
Yeah, last one would be if we're going to study like the outcomes of it, let's make sure that council gets apples to apples. What I'd hate to say is, hey, we quadrupled our numbers simply because we captured Keep Lewisville Beautiful numbers, which you didn't give us today.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Absolutely.
And how would we be managing and making sure that all of our volunteers that are showing up are not wolves in sheep clothing? I mean, we have a background check component to this. Like I know LASD has a strict background check and stuff.
We do as well. We have a policy on it. We check backgrounds currently. I think part of a future state would be us identifying what are our criteria for the different things we're doing. So if you're coming in to pick up trash with us one day, do we have the same level of background check for you as we do in a scenario in which you're a regular volunteer at the library?
And so will we have an orientation and a training, like on a wheel sort, like you're going to go train over here for this. If you're interested in this, then you need so many hours of training for that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Okay.
real quick, last thing I'll say about this, but one of the things that I've noticed with volunteer groups, and I'm playing off of Mayor's comment there, is that sometimes there's a lot of good kind of rivalry between groups. If there's a way to throw down a challenge between, Group 1 and Group 2, I think that'd be kind of a way to make this more fun, right?
You would have hoped that.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's right, yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I'm a bear poker
Good to
from
stoke
way
the
back.
competition, yes, sir.
Awesome. So it sounds like, in general, council's in favor of this idea?
Absolutely.
And perfect.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you all for engaging. Appreciate it.
Thanks, appreciate it.